Gabriela Sanchez, thank you very much for your time. You're taking a very different approach here. Rather than looking at the refugees themselves, you're looking at the people smugglers and the so-called people smuggler business model. What does that tell us about this so-called business model?
Let me give you a little bit of background on the kind of work that I do. I'm an anthropologist by training, and I have followed closely the steps of organizations that facilitate extra-legal border crossings around the world. Most of my expertise has been on the US-Mexico border. So when we think or when we talk about a business model, we really don't look at the community and the social dimensions of human smuggling, which are also very important to the development of the very market.
So what is the motivation for people to start a business where they're transporting other human beings, potentially, I suppose, making money out of other people's misery?
I think that is the most common narrative that we have come to know and learn about human smugglers. We have this idea that they are transnational organizations, extremely powerful, who mobilize an immense amount of resources. And most people who participate in smuggling are actual migrants themselves. They are also people who have experienced the illegality or of a border crossing. So there is, of course, a financial component to their participation, but we're also talking about, for many of them, helping out each other.
But are they interested in the welfare of the refugees, where the refugees may end up, or are they just interested in the business of transporting them, taking their money, moving them on, but not caring about the end result?
That is a very important concern and something that we really need to take a closer look at. In fact, human smugglers are one of the very few resources available to the people who are not able to get access to visas or passports. So they actually provide a level of protection. And I know that this is somewhat different or difficult to understand, but when you think that most of the people who are arriving or who travel, in fact, to other locations, to other countries, do not have access, do not have the recognition of their governments, and due to that cannot access passports or visas, you would understand why they have to secure the services of a human smuggler.
So really what you're saying is you can't separate the refugees from the people smugglers, so-called, who are assisting them to try to find safe passage. So in trying to target the people smuggler model, as we're hearing here in Australia, are we also running the risk of punishing the refugees themselves?
I think one implication of going after the smugglers is that we are criminalizing refugees. We are not actually going after the smugglers. If we were going after the smugglers, I think the approach would be very different. But what we are witnessing here is the criminalization of refugees and migrants around the world.
Now, is it the question, I suppose, now with what Australia is looking at with the various solutions, the Nauru solution or the PNG so-called solution, is that this is going to put an end to this business model of people smugglers. From your research, is that going to happen?
Evidence indicates, and this is evidence that has been collected by scholars around the world, that closing down a border or changing the places where someone, or in this case a refugee's land, and sending them to another location or forcing them to cross or to arrive through other locations does not have any kind of impact. They are not going to stop coming. You have to change the structural conditions that facilitate that movement. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is, it doesn't matter what you do. If you are only pretty much shifting people from one place to another, what you're going to do is increase the number of deaths and increase the risk that refugees face.
Is this borne out in the studies that you've carried out, particularly in the United States? Is that analogous to the situation we're looking at here in Australia?
It is very similar. In fact, in my article, as you may recall, I make a comparison on what happened during the 90s. The Immigration and Naturalization Service at the time was very effective at sealing segments along the border. And what happened was that they actually created a new route for migrants to come into the US. And that also had an implication in the number of deaths that we witnessed in the decade that followed. So what we are seeing here is a very similar strategy. Let's close one place, let's shift, in a sense, a market into another location, to a different location, and let's see what happens. And here, unfortunately, what we are likely to see is an increase in the level of risk that refugees face.
In Australia, the politicians here would argue that the aim of the offshore processing is in fact to stop the refugees coming here to Australia. Is that likely to happen according to your research, or are they still going to try to make their way to Australia via another route?
I can assure you that there's people in Indonesia right now looking for the services of a smuggler. Because people are trying to escape, are trying to get out of situations of extreme vulnerability. So it doesn't matter. The fact that the Prime Minister has asked or has already announced to everybody that their attempts to resettle or to come into Australia are going to be deterred by their relocation to PNG is not going to stop the flow of people.
Just finally then, is there a sense that this is a losing battle if you're trying to stop the so-called people smuggler model? If so, what are the alternative strategies?
In terms of stopping the flow?
In terms of being able to improve the safety of the refugees trying to come here and try to impose some order on the people smuggler business, if you like?
First of all, what we know that is going to work at this time is clear the visa backlogs in Indonesia. Come back and, cancel the decision to relocate people to PNG. Accept the refugees to stay. 80% of the people in the world 80% of the refugees stay in developing countries. Only about the 20% that you have left of refugees, only about 2% come to Australia. So we have to understand that this is going to generate a humanitarian crisis if we don't act right now.
Gabriela Sanchez, a pleasure to speak to you on the program. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.